In 2005, we visited Volvadans, a lodge operated by Namib Nature Reserve in the Namib Desert of Namibia. While there, we were introduced to the phenomenon of fairy circles, regularly spaced bare patches in a sea of grass. A typical fairy circle is a bare patch of sand about 4 to 15 meters in diameter, with a perimeter of taller grass. The regular patterns made by fairy circles were visible even as we flew in from the air. Note the wheel tracks for scale. Because I'm a biologist, our host challenged me to figure out what causes fairy circles. Their pattern immediately suggested termites to me. Our guide took us to excavate a fairy circle. And sure enough, there was a termite nest in the middle of the circle. So, 2 years later, we returned to the Namib Nature Reserve with the specific goal of showing that termites were the cause of fairy circles. Alas, in spite of digging up a dozen or more fairy circles, we found no sign of termite nests or even of termites. That took 3 days or so. Now, what should we do for the rest of our 1-month-long stay? In spite of the absence of termites in the fairy circles, signs of termites, including their nests, were abundant and widespread in the landscape. We later had this termite identified as Baucaliotermes hainesi, a harvester termite endemic to the Namib Desert. We rarely saw these termites traveling on the surface harvesting grass, so I reasoned that they must move around in underground tunnels, like fire ants. A leaf blower proved very handy for exposing the foraging tunnels, for the termites had glued their walls into coherent structures. A soft brush loosened the sand to be blown away, exposing the underground tunnels intact. You can see the tunnels appearing here. Targeted brushing laid bare the tunnels. Although fragile, the tunnels could be removed in intact segments. Rupturing the tunnels showed that they were in use, and the break was immediately defended by Nasut soldiers. The soldiers spray a resinous defensive material from the tips of their head nozzles, where a giant gland in their head opens. Over many days of brushing and blowing, we exposed large parts of the network of subway tunnels of 2 colonies. The system had junctions, overpasses, exits, and entrances, as well as live and abandoned tunnels. There were many side junctions that we did not expose, suggesting that we only revealed a fraction of the dense network of interconnecting tunnels. The function of this subway system was obviously to give the termites access to their foraging area without having to be exposed on the surface. This means the subway was designed with stations, or vertical risers, to the surface about every 50 centimeters. Between the stations, the tunnels tended to have a swoop-like structure, deeper midway between the stations and shallowing as the station was approached. Occasionally we came upon structures in the network that were not nests, but seemed to descend much deeper into the sand. It's possible that these deep shafts give termites access to water in this extremely arid habitat. The tunnels were not a simple tube, but had complex bulges, expansions, and narrowed sections. This is a bottom view. Here is a section of tunnel seen in side and bottom view, showing the characteristic bulges and risers. Careful dissection of these tunnels showed that the pockets often contained pieces of grass waiting to be transported to the nest. Apparently there is a division of labor in harvesting grass. One group of workers cuts the grass on the surface and deposits the pieces in the tunnel pockets, and another group of termites runs up and down the raised highway transporting the grass to the nest. And indeed, when we dissected a nest later on, the fresh grass clippings were mostly in the upper third of the nest at ground level and immediately below. Here I exposed a 2-meter section of tunnel, the upper panel, then wet the roof and removed the lower panel to expose the repeated lateral pockets and central raised highway. Also note the riser and the junctions. We dug up a nest for dissection and collection of its contents. Only the top projected above ground level. Not all nests project above the ground. Like many termites, the colony contained mature and immature workers, Nasut soldiers, and alate males and females. Another species of termite was cohabiting with this one. The architecture of the nest was very smooth and freeform, consisting of layers with connecting apertures. The nest was constructed of sand and fecal matter. Chambers in the top third of the nest, at or just below ground level, contained a lot of grass pieces deposited by transport workers. Foragers clearly cut them to a fairly uniform length for transportation. Presumably they're processed and eaten deeper in the nest. There's a certain organic beauty to these swirling smooth surfaces. After many days of brushing and blowing, we had exposed large extents of the foraging tunnels of 2 colonies, the first of which is seen here in 2 views. In this map, the red dots are risers to the surface and dotted lines are unexcavated side branches that suggest I've exposed only a small portion of a dense network. The network connects at least 2 live and 1 abandoned nest. The second excavation was equally complex. Like the first, it had no regular relationship to fairy circles. In addition to the risers and unexcavated branches, there were also vertical tunnels to greater depth, shown as blue dots. There's something enormous hidden here. The entire landscape is underlain by a dense network of termite underground foraging tunnels. Without question, termites are by far the major consumers of grass. By virtue of numbers, something very small has an effect that's very large. We often overestimate the importance of things we can see and underestimate that of things we can't see.